Hi, I'm Dawn Evans, and welcome to the Inside Source Executive Video Series. And with me today, I have Kate Vitasek. She is an educator, author, and consultant from the University of Tennessee. Kate, welcome.
Thank you, Dawn.
Thank you for joining me. You're the first author that I've gotten a chance to interview, so I'm excited to have you here. And I'm even more excited because of your new book. So can you, well, not that new, it's been out a few months now, and I know you have another one that works, but could you tell me a little bit about this book?
So vested outsourcing is really birthed out of the research that we've done at the University of Tennessee. Our work was actually funded by the United States Air Force, and the Air Force asked us to study how they could procure services better. They spend 57% of their entire procurement budget on services, so it's quite staggering. But that's really no different than a lot of companies, is it? You know, right. A lot of companies spend a lot of money on services, and they're harder to buy than a commodity, than a widget or a direct spend. And so they ask us to study the process of how to buy services and what would be a more efficient and effective manner. And in our research, I had the coolest job in the world because I get to go study some of the world's most successful outsourcing deals. So very cool job studying these. Everybody talks about why deals fail. We get to see why they succeed. And we took that and we crafted courseware that's now taught at the Defense Acquisition University. Wow. So the sourcing teams come together as a team and go through the process.
There's a Defense Acquisition
University, yes. Defense Acquisition, DAU.
Wow.
And we wrote the course for that, trained the trainers on it, and so now their teams, not just the Air Force, but all of the DoD goes through our course when they're trying to buy a large services acquisition.
Oh, that's so neat. I didn't know that. That's wonderful.
So for the commercial sector, we created a course at the university, and we wanted to write about it and share our wisdom in our book, Vested Outsourcing, and that's how the idea was really birthed, is to, all this cool stuff, we had to just share it as educators.
So you also have a very unique background. You've been on the buy side, you've been on the sell side. So tell me, how has that impacted the way you look at deals, or has it?
It absolutely has, because as a buyer, you know, you often don't realize how much power you have. You know, you're familiar with the golden rule, those who have the gold rule. Yep. And as a seller, you know, you want to always please your customer, and we often do things that we don't know are stupid. So, you know, I love the work of Stephen Levitt, Freakonomics and Super Freakonomics, and he talks about inherent and incentives. And so there's ways that we structure our deals that we don't realize are creating flaws. So, for example, the procurement folks are often rewarded on purchase price variance. So if they get a better price, they get a bonus, right? Well, think about the service provider. They're rewarded on commission for selling more revenue. We're at odds out of the bucket, right? We're just like, you know, structurally incompatible. And so as an outsider, as an academic, you could look in and go, oh my God, I did that and I did that. You know, I've been on the buy side. I was like, it's dysfunction. And we need to really step back and think how we craft these deals or architect the deals so that they really are aligned, and we're aligning the interests between the buyer and the seller. And that, quite honestly, is where we get the term vested from. There's a vested interest in the buyer and the seller achieving mutual desired outcomes.
So tell me this, since you've been on the buy side and the sell side, are people more excited if they're on the sell side because you're finally going to make the deal fair, or is the buy side like the concept as well?
You know what, about half and half are the folks who come to us in our class. You'd think it would kind of be the sellers, but there's a lot of buyers who are very frustrated. I talk about the watermelon scorecard. You know, their supplier's all green, but you know, it's red on the inside. You know, green scores red faces, and so they feel frustrated. And Tel actually has a wonderful video that they had done for us on the logistics side. And in the story, in the video, Todd Shire's talking about how they've gone through, you know, used competitive bid processes and gone through all the service providers, and there's only a handful of service providers that can manage Intel's business. He's like, maybe, just maybe, the problem's with us. Maybe we're asking for the wrong things. You know, we're asking for activities instead of what we really want, instead of outcomes. Yeah. And so when you step out, it's very obvious to see that. But when you're in the middle of it, especially if your bonuses are tied to it or your commission's tied to it, you can't see that you're actually creating and driving these inherent, you know, flaws and structural flaws. We poke fun of it actually in the book. The whole third chapter is on the 10 ailments, and they're the structural flaws, and we have real stories about how buyers or suppliers have acted based on the way the deal was structured. And we have real funny little stories that poke holes into it.
So what's the worst flaw that you see in a deal? Is there a single worst?
There's probably two that I would talk about. First, that's really stupid is what I call the outsourcing paradox. It's when you outsource to the experts. Everybody said, Peter Drucker said, do what you do best and outsource the rest. So everybody jumped on board to outsource, and because they weren't good at something. And they outsource to the experts and then tell them how to do it. You have these 500-page statement of works. That's retarded. I'm going to tell the facilities management company how often to mow the yard and how what size of the grass it needs to be clipped to and which lawnmower to use. They're experts, right? And so the second one that I think is definitely a structural flaw is what I call the activity trap, and that's where we pay for an activity or an FTE. So when we peg our economics of the deal to a transaction or a headcount, we get activities and headcount.
Yeah.
Because as a service provider, that's how I get rewarded. So why would I want to take out headcount? Why would I want to take out transactions?
Right.
And we aren't really promoting efficiencies. Instead, we have an inherent incentive to have inefficiencies.
Wow, that's so interesting. So tell me, I am very bullish on the fact that I think procurement belongs at the table around outsourcing deals. If they can strategically source, they can apply those skill sets to outsourcing. But what do you feel about procurement having a role in outsourcing?
Absolutely. Actually, we like to think of it as a team effort. So you need to have the business unit and the procurement group, and actually the legal group up front. One of the big flaws is that we craft these deals and throw it over to legal, and then we get all upset because legal pushes the T's and C's and upsets the supplier. Oh, I had a good deal, and you're pissing off my supplier, because you're pushing all this risk. So we actually advocate that you bring in the legal department early, and that from day one the procurement group sits at the table, and you create a team structured approach, and actually you bring your supplier into that team. And that's a little weird for some people, that your supplier sits at the table during the deal. So if you are doing a competitive deal situation, you want to narrow that down to a couple of suppliers and really invite them in to problem solve and solution. Because if indeed you truly are outsourcing because you don't have the competencies and skill sets, you want that service provider to solution with you, because you're not going to get an optimized solution if it's not what you're good at.
Okay, so your book tells us there are 5 rules that will transform outsourcing. So can you give our viewers your Cliff Note version?
Absolutely. So rule number 1, we've talked about a little bit, outcome-based versus transaction-based. So we need to buy the business results and not just activities. So if we buy activities, we're going to get activities. If we buy a green scorecard, we're going to get a green scorecard, right? So outcome-based versus transaction-based. Rule number 2 is focus on the what, not the how. If indeed the service provider has capabilities that can help us solve our problem, we want that nirvana of innovation. Innovation's all the rage these days. We need to not bind the hands of the service provider by constructing too detailed and prescriptive statement of works. So tell them what your problem is, and then have them solve the problem and write what we call a performance work statement. Right? So the service provider is coming back saying how to do it. Rule number 3 is clearly defined and measurable desired outcomes. If I'm going to buy outcomes, I want to have them clearly defined. How I'm going to measure success, because I'm going to pay out the economics of the deal are derived based on those outcomes. So we need to be very clear about what the outcomes are. Rule number 4 then is the pricing model with incentives that optimize to achieve these desired outcomes. Now, notice I used the word model, Dawn. I didn't say prices, I used the word model. And that's because from the day you sign your contract, if you have a price, there's a winner or a loser. Business happens, right? Business happens, and so cost of living adjustments, foreign insurance claims, fuel cost goes up. There's a winner or a loser. So instead, what we want to have is a fair pricing model, and a rising tide floats all boats and sinks all boats. So as business happens negatively, we're going to lose together. If it happens positively, we're going to win together. And you notice I used the word incentives. So in these deal structures, there's very little margin to show up and do the work. There's a lot of margin to show up to achieve desired outcomes. So when there's success, there's incentive payments tied to that. And that gets to the fifth rule, which is a governance structure. And in a vested deal, you have insight versus oversight governance structure. You know, it's all the rage now to have SRM, you know, supplier relationship management. And that's great, but in these very, very strategic relationships, you want to actually manage the business and not the supplier. You manage the business, not the supplier. So you still use a lot of the techniques and tools in SRM, but it's more of a joint governance instead of a, you know, I'm the buyer, you're the supplier, I have to manage you. So that you change the tone and how you do that. Very transparent, very fact-based, very problem-solving oriented. And so those are really the 5 rules. And so when you craft a deal and you follow all of those rules, you can create magic and really in studying these deal structures, literally they're transformational. It's not just incremental improvement, it's night and day.
So tell me, we talked a little bit about legal, and this one I'm really excited about. How often do you see legal being brought in during the beginning of the whole concept and you know, drafting the concept and all that up front? Are they brought in up front very often?
They're not brought in up front very often. Now, there are a couple of lawyers in the industry that kind of specialize in these kinds of deals. Ed Hansen being one. There's a construction lawyer out of Atlanta that does these kind of relationship-based contracts. And so bring them in, really looking at the relationships. I love the session that y'all had earlier on getting value out of the legal group. And Ed made a very good point in his argument that you should use your RFP process to really start your change management effort, right? And so there's a lot of tricks, a lot of psychology in how you structure these. There's a lot of economics and psychology. And so we need to start bringing in our legal counsel. But people don't want to do that because they're expensive. Right.
Well, even your in-house counsel. I mean,
that's exactly
right. We
right.
might have them on staff, but so we had our first legal roundtable this week, and it was eye-opening for me to hear some of the comments. They feel that everybody looks like at them like they're going to slow down the deal. So they feel like the ugly stepchild a lot of times, which is shocking to me because you always think of legal as, you know, they're always up there, you can't touch them. And yet they feel that they want to be invited. And they said that we're not invited, we're seeing it as something that's just going to slow down the deal. So how can we get procurement and the business units to welcome legal up front? Because the lawyers feel that they're not very welcomed.
Well, our lawyers have to change their style a little bit. You know, you know, think about it. You go to law school, and your job is to protect the company. So anytime something risky is discussed, they want to, I have to make you aware of this risk. So it frightens all the business people because think about it, Dawn. If I'm going to create value, I have to take some risk. I have to take some investments. And as a lawyer, my job is to protect the company. And so it takes a pretty special lawyer to understand and really embrace risk and saying, we have to address risk, but how do we do it smartly? How do we allocate those risks instead of shift those risks? You know, it's much safer to shift risk than it is to allocate risk. That's, you know, so it kind of takes a different training on the legal community. Some of the best lawyers that I've actually seen have been on the buy side and the sell side.
That helps.
And it really does help. It really does help because now you see the empathy and you can really begin to craft a good deal structure.
So it's been said that the vested outsourcing model is to outsourcing like Six Sigma was to manufacturers. So help us draw that analogy.
Well, I'm very privileged that people make that analogy. I think, you know, Six Sigma and Lean as well really were business concepts that, you know, may not be for everyone, but the companies that embraced it when it was right for their company were able to have radical improvements. And so vested outsourcing isn't for every type of deal. Some cultures, literally, it's not in their DNA to have a vested deal. You know, they just couldn't possibly, you know, play nice to their supplier. Their supplier is a big bully and can't play nice in the marketplace. But when it is a good cultural fit for you, it is a fantastic toolkit. And I think it's kind of like Lean or Six Sigma. It'd been around for a long time. You know, Lean was really hidden in Toyota production system in the 40s. And until Jim Womack wrote the book, The Machine That Changed the World, and coined, you know, TPS, you know, he called it Lean. And now it's sexy, right? Lean is sexy. Or Six Sigma. Deming had been working on Six Sigma since the 40s. And so here it comes now. GE and Motorola adopt it, call it Six Sigma. That's kind of a cool, sexy name. You know, they're able to really teach it. And I think that's one of the things that we do at the University of Tennessee. We really specialize, you know, especially myself, applied research. and have, I hope I have a gift to teach people things and look at things a little bit differently. And so by bringing the concepts and making them practical and showing the case studies, the work that we're doing on the case studies, I think it makes it real, and people go, wow, I get it. It's not just something that's locked or hidden up in just Toyota or just Motorola. We want to share that so that everyone can adopt it.
Well, you do have a gift for sharing, because I have to tell you, just before we came in for the interview, and you spoke at our general session, we had a one-word tweet, which is the only time we've ever had a one-word tweet, and it was brilliant. So that's someone after your session just tweeted, brilliant, exclamation point. All capitals, by the way.
Oh, that's so cool. Very good. I get excited to hear that. And we do put a lot of time and energy into really saying, how can we teach people? That's, at the university, that's what we do for a living. And it's like, how can we change? How can we get people that have only been on the buy side or only being on the sell side, their personal incentives are tied to certainly to step out and go, wow, there's a better way.
Well, you're doing a great job. I mean, you're getting the message across. Everybody after your session came up to me and just applauded you. So you just broke down, I mean, you took something so complex into 5 simple rules, and every rule is so obvious, but until you stand up there and put those rules together, we're not doing it. And it's shocking. So I just want to thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thank you, and thanks to SIG for having us here. And actually, I'm very excited about the white paper that we just did. Great partnership with SIG, because the best gift that we can give is education and teaching people that there really is a better way.
Oh, well, thank you, and we love having you involved with SIG. So thank you.
Thanks.
So folks, this is Dawn Evans, and I'll see you next time on our video series. Thank you for joining us today. Bye-bye.